it's good for you to know that so you can be on the journey to be the best self that you are.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today on my channel. We have something so exciting. We have my friend Taylor, who's actually an Enneagram coach. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Okay, so a little about Taylor and I. Taylor and I actually went to high school together, and we recently reconnected, and Taylor actually assessed me on the Enneagram scale. Is that what you would say,
Yeah,
scale?
absolutely.
And we had a session together. She's an Enneagram coach, and I just feel like I learned so much about my why. And so I just thought having Taylor on the channel, she could really help you understand how you can use your Enneagram number to be a better teacher and just understand your why and be a better person. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is my heartbeat to all of what you just said. Absolutely.
Amazing. So Taylor has a presentation she's going to take us through. If you're not familiar with the Enneagram, she's going to kind of break it down. And then I would recommend, Taylor, would you say if people don't know their Enneagram, then they should go and take the test and then come back, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the assessment that I had Danielle take, I feel like it's very accurate because it gives you a scale kind of what type you are more dominant with. And it'll give you other types too. And that's where, Enneagram coaches can kind of come in and help you kind of figure it out. As an Enneagram coach, I would never type somebody. I would never want to come into a session and, say, well, based on your results, this is your type. We walk through it together, and I want to try to help you as much as possible discover what your primary type is because you know you the best.
Right, right. Really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was so fascinated going through my own with you. I feel like you can just learn so much about yourself,
Oh,
especially your why.
absolutely.
So I love personality tests, and a lot of it is the ones I've taken so far is like your strengths and you belong here. But this is the first one I really took where it was like this, why do you do the things you do?
Yes.
And that was really interesting for me because I feel like I can work on being a better part of myself by understanding the why.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And it's tough hearing sometimes the
Yeah.
things that we're about to go through, just because, most personality tests are really uplifting and are really just, big
Yeah, they
and
are.
everything to kind
I'm
of do that.
amazing.
Absolutely. And this one's kind of a downer at times, but it's just so good to be self-aware because in order for you to know how you are when you're not doing so well, it's not to be, judgy, or it's not to feel like you're a good person. You are. It's good for you to know that so you can be on the journey to be the best self that you are.
Taylor, I know you have a slide for us today. Can you tell us what that's going to be a little bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had put together a slide just all based on communication. There's so many elements into the Enneagram that I could dive into, but this specifically is kind of communication just comes with any teacher. You have to communicate, and how you communicate comes across, to people differently. And so it's nice to just be able to know like how you are on your really great days and your not so great days. And then kind of, I included some adjectives of communication styles just so you're aware of some of the strengths that you possess. And sometimes it's hard to see these strengths and be like, oh, is that me or is that not me? And that's why a coach can come into play and be like, yes, it sounds like you. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I decided to do for you guys today.
All right, awesome. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, at the end of the video, we're going to get into the questions that some teachers had sent me if you follow my Instagram. So be sure to stay for that. And then also, Taylor is a coach too. So we'll talk more at the end too about how you can work with her, and you can also find all of her information below. All right, so let's get into these slides.
As far as what the Enneagram is, if you guys have not heard of it before, that is okay. Not many people have. It is an ancient kind of test. It's not your typical personality test. Like Danielle was saying, most tests test behavior, this tests the why. So it reveals not what a person does, but the why behind why they do the things that they do. So it derives from the Greek word ennea, which means 9. So it's a 9-pointed symbol. And then gram, which stands for drawing, Enneagram. So it is an amazing, test that just represents the, you know, specific thinking and the ways that we think and the things that we do. And I love this perspective on it because, or this analogy, I guess I should say. So picture yourself wearing like a certain colored glasses. So, you know, me being a type 6, I wear red colored glasses. I see the world in red. You know, where Danielle, she, you know, most likely is a type 7, and she wears those yellow glasses and she just sees life in yellow. You know, we can see each other, we see the same exact things, but the way we see it is completely different. And sometimes it's just helpful to be aware, one, of yourself, but then also be aware of the people that you are doing life with, and knowing, you know, how to show them grace because they don't think the way that you think and they don't have the same motivation as you. So it's really helpful in relationships and your work setting, and especially being an ESL teacher and just understanding, you know, maybe how more so how you're wired, because a lot of the kids that you're working with, they're probably not going to know their Enneagram type until a little bit later in life, but you have such an impact on their lives that probably is going to help them, you know, discover who they are and what their motivation is. And then we could go to type 1 slide. That is the perfectionist. So I'm going to go through all of these types with you. And if you guys don't know beginning sense of like what each type is, that's okay. This is all about ESL and all about communication. And I'm going to kind of put up some slides about every type's core motivation, and then also some adjectives of communication styles, and that are, you know, awesome for you being a teacher. But then I'm going to kind of go through a day in the life of maybe when you're doing super well in ESL, and then maybe a day when you're not doing super well. So definitely feel free to take notes. I'm going to go through there's so much involved in the Enneagram, so this is just touching the bare bones of it. But if you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to either Danielle or myself. But so type 1s, they're the perfectionists. Their core motivation is to be good, ethical, moral, and right all the time. Those are a couple of the communication styles. But when type 1s are doing really well, they come off as being very honest, fair, poised, polite, very sincere, and their ideas and opinions are sound and reasonable, and they make sure goodness prevails for everyone. So such a good like teacher, you know, they're awesome. But when they're not doing super well, they can speak in teaching, correcting, and judgmental ways, becoming more irritated and opinionated, and showing their displeasure visibly. So kind of both sides of things. They're doing really well, they're not doing so well. Good to be aware of both. And then the next slide would be type 2, which is the helper. So their core motivation is to be appreciated, wanted, and loved. And those are some of their kind of communication styles. On a day that a type 2 is doing super well, will ask great questions and give amazing, helpful guidance. They're empathetic listeners. They're warm, compassionate. They have such a good presence. And then maybe days that they're not doing so well, they might come off as a little passive aggressive, a little irritable, and, you know, maybe a little demanding, direct, giving unsolicited advice. They could be overextending sometimes, and they channel their hurt sometimes in anger by, you know, complaining or being a little passive aggressive. And then the type 3 would be the achiever. Their core motivation is to be successful, efficient, valuable, and admired. So on days that they're doing really well, they're clear, straightforward, confident people, encouraging, and they focus on finding solutions and motivating others. They're definitely great cheerleaders. And then when type 3s aren't doing well, they can be irritated, self-promoting, impatient with emotional and lengthy conversations. They could be very short and unwilling to, you know, disclose what's, you know, really going on inside of them. They're not super in touch with their emotions when, you know, they're not doing so hot.
So as a teacher, it would be really important that they're aware of how they're feeling, because I feel like a type 3 would be an awesome teacher, but then also kind of lose their patience easily with kids.
Absolutely. And especially with maybe a student that has a lot of feelings. Sometimes, you know, feelings are put on the back burner for a type 3 because they just don't know how to handle feelings sometimes, and especially other people's feelings. It could probably overwhelm them a little bit because they're just so goal oriented and we got to get stuff done. So yeah, definitely. But then, yeah, the type 4, the individualist, their core motivation is to be unique, special, authentic, significant, and original. Type 4s, when they are doing super well, they are authentic, they're deep, empathetic. They're great listeners with others that are sad or suffering. They're very okay in that space. They express their emotions with inner balance. But then when they're not doing so hot, they can be moody, emotionally intense, explosive even or cold, detached, condescending. They steer conversations to focus on what's going inside of them. So this is kind of the opposite of 3. They love feeling. They are very content with people that are feeling. So, and they're good readers too. They can read when people aren't doing so well, and they're, they appreciate vulnerability. They would love when a student would come to them and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling." Like that would be such like a gift for them, because they're going out of their comfort zone and like coming forth and saying something. And then a type 5, the investigator, their core motivation is to be competent, capable, knowledgeable, and insightful. When they're doing really well, they're very respectful, non-intrusive, curious, observant. They encourage in stimulating conversations. They love having, conversations that are stimulating with others. But then when they're not doing so well, they could be overly, brief, very cold, a little arrogant at times, and they might withdraw or detach. They're the only number on the Enneagram that has a literal battery, where they, need time to recharge. Once their battery's done for the day, they're done. And so that's a little bit about the 5.
Oh, interesting. So if you're a 5 and you're a teacher, you've got to be really aware, I think, of like setting your schedule, because with a lot of companies you can't cancel or you get penalized. So really being aware of like, how much am I actually going to be able to do without draining myself out for, not even just work, but then with family afterwards and things.
Absolutely. And they easily can. They know when their body needs to recharge, but sometimes they can just like overextend and it's bad. So yeah. And then type 6, this is my type. So this is their core motivation is to have security, guidance, and support. When 6s are doing really well, they're warm, caring, compassionate, witty, funny, good listeners, and like to engage in healthy 2-way conversations. When they're not doing so well, they can be overly reactive, pretty anxious, skeptical, suspicious, and they question and doubt others and themselves. So they're the ones on the Enneagram that have kind of that inner committee, and they really struggle to trust themselves. And if you can't trust yourself, you probably can't trust a lot of other people. So paranoia can be definitely a downside to this type.
So how would you say you should combat that as a type 6 if you're a teacher?
Yeah, I would say, having journaling is really helpful, and like getting your thoughts out there, and talking with somebody that you trust, and, have them speak truth into you, I would say is really important. And just knowing that, your job is to cater to others in this moment and help others like manifest that into giving, instead of feeling like you need to be given things. I feel like that's super helpful to just have kind of like a servant heart. And then type 7, which after speaking with Danielle, we're pretty sure this is her type, which is the enthusiast, which makes so much sense. Core motivation is to be fully satisfied and content. When 7s are doing really well, they speak in a fun, lively, lighthearted, upbeat, optimistic, joyful way. They make the time to listen to others without taking over the conversation. When they're not doing so well, they can be hyper and scattered sometimes, keep attention on themselves by telling long, grand stories, maybe reframe negatives into positives. If circumstances remain negative, they will feel that they need to just run away from it, causing problems sometimes in, relationships that want to, work through those issues.
So how would you say that I should deal with that as a 7 with students? Maybe even if I have students that are really negative, how do I deal with that without wanting to just shut off?
I would say what would be good would, instead of, because I think sometimes it's kind of a defense mechanism. You want to jump right away into saying like, oh, but let's be positive, let's be happy. Instead, maybe focus on asking clarifying questions to know that you are listening and you care, even though your inner self is like, I want to run away from this. Acting like, I'm going to ask you some questions and dig a little deeper to why you're feeling that, because that kind of separates, they're being really negative and you have that positive outlook but you're coming together and bridging that gap to be able to say, okay, I'm going to ask some questions that is unbiased. Like they're not going to know what I'm feeling in this circumstance, and they're going to feel cared for.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then type 8, which is the challenger, their core motivation is to protect themselves and those in their inner corner. So when type 8s are doing pretty well, they are going to be generous, loyal friends, honest and assertive. They have a confident presence. They protect and stand for the weak, those they love, and those at mercy and injustice. And then when they're not doing so well, they can be demanding, insensitive, challenging, quick to anger, pretty assertive and blunt, and unwilling to see how they are hurting others sometimes.
So how would you say to, if challengers can't see that they're affecting people in that way, would you recommend like journaling, or how do you recommend being able to recognize that?
Yeah, sometimes I think 8s really value honesty, and they value, if they're being combative with somebody, they respect people that are combative back with them. So it's one of those things where I would say it's more so advice for people that are around challengers to not be fearful to say something back.
Okay.
Because sometimes they can just be really, they're not meaning to, they're actually, their hidden side is so soft, they have such a soft, like tender side to them, but sometimes they just feel for whatever reason that they like to have like that confrontation or that heat, and so when you give it back to them, that's like, they will never be upset. They will be like, they'll be like, oh wow, they stood up for themselves, and they'll be really impressed. So it could be one of those things, obviously in a respectful way. So yeah. And then type 9, this is the last one. We made it. This is the Peacemaker. So core motivation for 9s is to have inner stability and peace of mind. When they're doing really well, they're just so kind, they're receptive, open, non-judgmental, peaceful, optimistic, warm, good listeners. They engage with others in life. And, when they're not doing so well, they can have, they can meander, they can become sloth-like, kind of unsure of what they feel or think, but then they can also become a little passive aggressive and detached and stubborn at times. They might say yes when they really want to say no, but the fear of being in conflict or upsetting someone is just too much for them. So they're the yes people for sure.
So you're saying these are the teachers that when they get parent requests should take a second before they just agree.
Yeah,
they always feel like they have to agree.
Absolutely. They can wear themselves out very thin just to avoid conflict, when in the end, if you are, saying yes to everything, you are going to be depleted, but it's a different type of depletion. They would rather be depleted because they're working too hard and appeasing people than being depleted because they stood up for themselves and said no.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty much all of them. I have my last slide is just to walk away with, never let a number define you. I think, the Enneagram has gotten a bad name because it has allowed people to see themselves as a number, or people, will talk to other people and be like, oh, you're such a 5 or you're such a 6. And that's,
you're such a 6.
Yeah, it's hurtful. I mean, especially if,
Yeah.
you don't really know that much about the Enneagram and you aren't a number. You are so much more than that. This is just to help you understand the meat of that number. And then, if you don't like journaling, talk about the why. I like to journal about the why. Why am I anxious? Why am I like, what is the root of my why? And you'll be surprised of how like therapeutic that can be, to just dig into the why that you do something. And that's really going to help you understand yourself a lot more. And then allow room for grace for yourself and for other people. We mess up all the time. We're human beings. We're going to mess up. Allow, to give yourself grace and give other people grace, because like I said at the beginning, those colored glasses, you're not going to be able to understand if somebody isn't the same type as you. And so learning about other types, learning about yourself is a really great tool to show that grace. And, just continue learning, listen to podcasts, read books on it. That's what I did. I've, been doing that for 4 years, and I always learn something new. I mean, I don't feel like I'll ever be know everything about the Enneagram, because there is so much, but I've just so much enjoyed, getting my certification to be a coach now, to help people understand their types, but then also just understand my, journey as well.
Yes, and I highly recommend, if anyone's interested in, if this was really interesting to you, and I'm sure, I know for me it was, if you want to work with Taylor one-on-one, she'll really help you dive more into your Enneagram results and your why, and it is really neat. So I highly recommend reaching out to her, and she has a website coming out with all of her pricing, and you can also contact her on her Instagram as well if you want to talk with her more and set that up. I really highly recommend doing that. Okay, so now I want to go into the questions that we promised that we would answer at the end. If you don't follow me on Instagram, make sure to go follow me at Hey Danie J, and I'll put Taylor's here as well, and you can find them both at the bottom. But I had asked on my Instagram if people had any questions for Taylor, and we had some really good ones. So Cassie asked, is there a connection between Enneagram and zodiac signs?
So what I had said to that, I'm kind of just starting to get into the zodiac signs. I have a friend who's really into them, and I would say probably not, just because the zodiac tests more of your behavior and just kind of like outward, like how you act, whereas the Enneagram, it tests more of that why and that inner motivation that nobody really knows. But I will say that 3 8s in my life are all Leos, so there could be somewhat of a connection.
Okay, Laura had a question about, she said she thinks she knows the types of her kids. And she said, when is it too early? What age should a kid be before, they have their Enneagram number, they take the test?
Yeah, so I would say stay away from typing kids, just because they're probably not going to know and understand fully their type probably until their 20s, I would say. Kind of when the brain stops developing.
Yeah, that's true. And you're always changing and things. So, and you probably would want them to be able to take it themselves, right? Where they can
Yeah,
reflect on those
absolutely.
answers. And
Yeah.
but my nephew's a total 3. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I don't know if that's true at all. Okay, and we had one last question from Maggie, and it's something that I wondered as well. Can you be more than one number? And then she said, LOL.
Add the LOL. Oh, that's awesome. So probably not, but that also digs into a whole realm of the Enneagram. So you have your dominant type. That's just like, that's it. That's what you are. You have different paths that you go to when you're, healthy, kind of unhealthy, which I kind of talked about in the communication element of this, presentation. But there are tri-types, so you can have your certain type that is part of its own tri-type. So I'll give myself for an example. I'm a type 6, which is part of the head triad, and then there's 2 other triads. There's the heart and the gut. And so out of the 9 numbers, there's 3 numbers that belong to each. And so I can dive in from my dominant number and the other triads. So I think my triad would be maybe like a 6-2-1. So I would be, more of, my 6 is in the head, and then my 2 would be in the heart, and then my 1 would be in the gut. So yes and no, I would say. But yeah, definitely something that you can dig very deep into about.
Okay, so if you are interested in private coaching with Taylor, you actually offer like a free 30-minute sort of consultation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my Instagram right now, like Danielle was saying, I'm gonna work to get my website, up and running. But for right now, I'm kind of just working out of my Instagram. So right now in my bio, I have a Calendly link. So it's hooked up to my Gmail. I do have a full-time job, so it's mostly in the evenings during the week. But if that doesn't work, just DM me and we can find a weekend or whatever works for you during a lunch break or something. But it's really easy, no strings attached. It's very casual, just talking. You are not gonna hurt my feelings if you don't end up, doing anything with me. I love meeting new people, so it's honestly such a joy for me to just like meet people and kind of see what they know and don't know about the Enneagram.
All right, awesome. So you can check out that link if you want to set up a 30-minute free consultation. And then Taylor also has her pricing for her hourly rates, and she even offers some really great packages that you can buy and kind of go through a program. Or is there anything else you want us to take away? Any last advice for us online teachers?
I would just say that biggest element of it all, show grace for yourself, love yourself so deeply. And, even if it's the Enneagram you're involved in, if it's the Myers-Briggs, if it's the Strengths Finders, just really dedicate some time to reflecting on how you're wired in yourself, because if you do that and if you take time to do that, you're going to be a better person to those around you.
See, don't you just love Taylor? Everyone's like, I just feel like you're such a radiating personality. I've missed you so much, and I feel like it just I think that everyone else watching this, comment below if you agree. I think Taylor is just the best, and highly recommend working with her. I know I want to set up some things with you too, and just dive into all the closets. But
Absolutely.
all right, well, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you next video.